Wellbeing strategy, and even though I'm saying it, open effort. No, so that's Rachel. Rachel.
Hello. So we've been looking at the youth strategy, disability strategy, and positive ageing strategies. They haven't received any sort of funding or implementation properly for the past 5 years. But we still seem to be supporting these groups and implementing a lot of the actions through just our normal business as usual practices. So I've suggested a resolution that we revoke the strategies and the associated action plans because the cost of reviewing them and setting up new actions may not be feasible at this time.
Good bold move. It is a bold move. So I did quite like potentially the comprehensive report review of the strategies which suggested maybe emerging and just to a wellbeing statement. Or the thing about the strategies, it just means that saying that we care about these different sectors. For the arts strategy, I think it has made a difference and pulled people together. For the disability strategy, it has reawakened our responsibilities in terms of infrastructure. For the ageing strategy, it's similar to the disability strategy outcomes by providing the same level of infrastructure requirements. So I'm just wondering what people think.
The art strategy is separate to this, so this isn't the art strategy, this is the disability positive ageing strategy. I'm interested in, to me, business as usual is uncertain at this point in time. That the next LTP will be different to this one, and so that is a reality that we can't rely on things like community grants to somehow fulfil the work of these strategies. I absolutely understand that a strategy that isn't resourced, both with an implementation plan and resources, is not useful. So I acknowledge that. However, I am struggling with this resolution if we revoke them with nothing else other than business as usual, and we've been consistently saying there is no such thing in these times. Well, when we're not doing our responsibility in terms of well-being justice. So I'm looking for, if we can't implement the strategies properly and we can't resource to review what is the bridge or the holding pattern so this work is not lost. That's my fundamental.
I agree totally with what Sally's saying. If you go back to Tracy Martin, she was our seniors advocate from government. She did a fantastic job. And 30% of the population of the territory is over 65. So I find it difficult to walk away from this and do nothing. So I don't like you. I don't know where the bridge is. If we revoke this, where's the bridge? And it's part of the government's health and wellbeing policy. They're very strong on pushing that down. We just walking away from it. So I'm confused.
Well, my thinking is that that's why I mentioned a morphing of 3 into maybe just the one wellbeing strategy, which is in there. But it doesn't need to be a strategy. It can just be a policy. I just wonder if the wording's correct.
So I wouldn't disagree with that. However, in this and in our current planning for LTP, we're not resourcing our team to do that work. So if a resolution came up like that, we would need to then implement it properly.
That's fine. Murray.
There's one way of saying it, that after we've come through COVID and doing this LTP, we acknowledge we haven't got the resources, but we'd like to leave the strategies in place for the next 3 years as status quo and perhaps with refunding in the next 3 years.
Can we do it? Because that would be, I'd rather just leave them there. We don't, do we have to go out to public consultation on the way all over again? It's If we decide not to, we can do that.
I don't believe in any public consultation on a document that's already been consulted on. We're just saying we're not going to employ the resources to do anything with it at this point.
These are not statutory documents, therefore they have no.
Because I said to me would then still keep them on the books, so to speak.
Put it in, yeah.
Yeah,
I think we need to provide them.
But the main reason this paper's been brought here is to make a conscious decision about this. I think it's really important that we have this discussion, because one of the main emphasis that I've put on as we go through the LTP is that we are recommending non-statutory stuff be challenged. And this is a non-statutory document, and therefore it needs to be challenged. It doesn't mean that we have to get rid of it, but with no actions for the last 5 years in relation to a strategy that has not had any funding allocated to its implementation, it's one of those clear chances to challenge it. And
so
that's
can a
what's-
wordsmith come up with a resolution?
No, we just don't do the second one.
Yeah.
So you only do the first one. So, because I'm quite in the space of keeping them, but not necessarily sourcing them doing the action, because we're doing the action as we implement our infrastructure.
Yeah, I'm just going to take, Rob said we put no funding there for the last 5 years. In actual fact, we have on footpaths, we've done a lot of, I know Minnie we've done a lot of work on footpaths. You know, there's a whole,
Tartier Bridge, we're making it ramped so that
there's a whole lot of stuff.
Whangatar Boardwalk,
Down the road.
that's, you know, just, there's actually quite a lot that we do, but we don't put it in terms that are specifically for people with disabilities, or specifically for the aged sector, or specifically for the youth. I mean, look at all the skateboard parks that we do for youth, so, Jerry.
And I hear what you're saying, and it is, we put money into bricks and mortar, we're not putting into these strategies, but I will tell the story as well. That's the thing I hear, you know. Yeah, lady ring out the other day and come home and talk to her about what you want, a footpath, didn't you? Yeah, so I want a footpath in my street, so people don't know, we're not saying anything about it, what we're actually doing. So if it's going to stay there, we need to tell a story around it, otherwise it's a waste of time sitting there saying, I'm not going to do anything for 3 years, because we haven't done nothing. And COVID was not about the fact of we didn't do anything there, or we did things for it. COVID was about a situation which you reflect on this, because it's a changing world we're in. We shouldn't just walk away from it. We should think about it.
So, in actual fact, I think you talk about the message. I think it's the message from us. We don't say that we are supporting our youth by creating a skate park. I mean, look at the great skate park. We put it out there and the whole community's involved and we're engaged, but we don't specifically say this is our meeting our youth disability strategy by supporting and providing for our young people. So, right,
No, that's just for Carol, we're saying what most is, so we take the for age at home. Everything around that was about better accessibility for people that had disabilities. It was the blind institute, and those people coming to us, and so the other work that's being done is helping people with disabilities to get around town with the appropriate servicing and safety labels and stuff. So what you're saying is right. It is being done by default, but we don't reference it to what we are supporting. And I think the issue around what you do for youth and for elderly and for aged and for mobility, there's a big opportunity to tell that story. Right?
Yeah.
So I couldn't agree more, because it is being done.
we just don't share it the way we could. So, Robin, did you want anything to add anything?
I mean, so I think, Sally, you summed it up quite nicely in your bit at the beginning, and I don't really have a lot more to add to that, except that I think revoking these would make me very uncomfortable in terms of not having something to then reference back to. And yes, it's really great that we're doing all these things. And in that first report that you did, Rachel, you had that list of actions, and you comprehensively answered the question of, what are these actions and how are we making sure that we are actually doing the things that we need to do and able to have a positive ageing environment. But just revoking them feels really uncomfortable with me. Yeah.
John?
I tend to agree with Robin there. I was just looking at the, on page 234, number 3, assessment options, the tables there. It's still clear, I think, Rachel, we actioned 17 matters because of the fact that we had the strategy. will those 17 matters be picked up and as business as usual without the strategy?
Possibly, possibly not.
Possibly not, so it's not doing it.
So I'm just looking at, on the resolutions on page 230.
Yeah,
I'm just looking at, we just
keep it.
received a report entitled Review of the Social Work Plan, and we retain the existing strategies.
Yeah.
Just as the first resolution.
Can I ask the CEO, does that cover what?
I'd just like to take a bit of direction from Rachel and Steve, if I can at this point in time. I'm just wondering if we agree to not review the strategies, therefore we don't do the formal review process, but that council directs staff to use the document as a guideline during this LTP triennium. Would that be an appropriate thing to do from your perspective, guys? I think it might be well, because it sort of captures both elements of what we're saying, is that staff are already doing these sorts of things in their normal operation. And if council directs us to use the strategy as a guidance document in its activities, it means that we still capture the emphasis of what's in the document without actually going through a formal review. Would that be?
I think feel free to jump in, Rachel, but if the resolution was to not review the strategies and associated action plans at this time, then that's the decision. We won't review them. Those strategies will still be on books. I actually think it is a great recommendation to bring to council, because we are serving those 3 interest groups despite the existence of strategies. You know, persons with disabilities, it's now become part of core business in the whole country. So I think the resolution to not review them at this time would be useful, because if someone then says your disability strategy is 2012, and we can say, well, here's the 2020 resolution. We thought about it and we decided to resolve it. That would be my suggestion.
Okay.
Does that sound okay? I'll just check with Rachel, she's a lot more informed than me on this.
Rachel?
Yeah, perhaps potentially add something that we will review them in another 3 years, or?
We'll do 2 separate ones. Receives report, that's fine, and then resolves to not review the strategies at this time.
Yeah.
So let's keep it nice and simple.
Yeah.
And they can roll over for another 3 years. How does that sound to everybody?
You want that in the 3 years in? You'd like to see that in there?
Well, I think 3 is quite reasonable. The strategies themselves said they would be reviewed, one said every 2 years, the other said every 3 years. So that's a bit consistent, and it means we can look at it around the time of the next LTP.
Okay, and next LTP, good. Okay, resolve to not review the strategies at this time and reconsider at the next LTP. So we're receiving and just rolling it over for another 3 years.
And perhaps it's prior to the next LTP. So then
Yes.
I'll go with that. Moving Sally, seconded Robert.
Yep.
All those in favour? Oh, any further discussion? Gary, you all right with that?
Yes, I am, thank you.
Martin? Oh, he's just coming in and out. isn't he?
Yeah.
Okay, awesome, thank you. All those in favour, please say aye.
I just like to say, I think I appreciate the bold decision from staff in terms of this. There's something there, and it isn't something fluffy, it is something to say, this is what I am bringing to you for these reasons. And I appreciate that, that exactly the sort of information I want to get. So thanks, Rachel.
Absolutely, that was very well said, thank you, Tony. And I endorse his comments. It is, because we want all staff to feel they've got the freedom to put us point us in a direction that we may not be comfortable with, that we have to give some thought to. So thank you very much. Tony, well done. Thank you. Not often we necessarily do that. And all those against, please say, no, so I've done the please say aye. Against there being none, carried. So well done, Tony, good. Okay, that's the social wellbeing and representation of the review of the Māori.
Through you, Madam Chair, I'll take the report as read. Not technically a requirement for a resolution to be made at this point, but I just thought it was good to bring a report through for council to consider, and the recommendation is that there be no change, no establishment of Māori wards at this time.
Okay, any discussion? Do you want to discuss this? Do I have a mover?
I'll move.
Mover Tony, Secretary Robin.
No, I was going to ask something. No, I'm
Yeah,
okay, cool. When we had this discussion in that workshop, one of the workshops, Martin and I were asking what level of engagement iwi had with this decision, because we wanted to make sure that we weren't just making a decision on behalf of that, actually having gone to any of our iwi partners, the people trying to build relationships, and said, look, this is what we've decided on your behalf. So my question really is, how did that progress? Did we progress that? Did we have?
Not a huge amount of engagement with iwi. As I recall, the mayor may have emailed David and sort of asked what he thought. I'm not quite sure what the response was on that. In an ideal world, yes, you'd have a long conversation, but we just we haven't.
Yeah,
simply haven't
and
had
that was
time.
part of
Yeah.
the exchange that we had at the time.
Yeah.
We've had a number of discussions.
Yeah.
And talked about various things, including a unitary authority between the three councils, Thames-Coromandel District, Hauraki and Manawatu Piaka, because we're all part of that Te Tala Utāwhai, which is the eastern side of the Waikato Waioi Waka.
Just,
Sorry, can I just finish up? And this is, what's happening though, we have a representation review, and this goes out for public consultation. So this is by no means, correct me if I'm wrong, this is by no means the end of that discussion and then opportunity for further discussion. Is that correct?
It cycles around, so it's an ongoing conversation that can happen every 3 or 6 years, depending on which aspect of it. There's no statutory requirement for council to make a decision. There's 3 elements on the representation review, which is the first past the post thingy-doodle, which we've decided. There's this, which is non-mandatory, and then there's the third part, which is the number of elected members, the makeup of wards, and that can occur between March and September next year. And the intention was to probably do that July to decouple it from the LTP. So there is I think it's if council was to be resolving to have a Māori ward for the 2022 election, it would need to resolve that by the 23rd of November 2020. So, and then it cycles round. I'm just not quite sure if it's every 3 years or every 6 years. I think it's every 3 years. Once a decision is made, it's then locked in for 6, but I could be slightly wrong.
Murray?
just from a battery base on the view, Joe is very happy with the existing status quo.
Right, okay, thank you. Sally?
In my opinion, looking at where we sit as a council, we're sort of walking the 5K, and we haven't, it would be silly to book in for the marathon yet, because we're not ready on our side to partner in this way. So I think it's an evolving thing, and I think the next 3 years, hopefully, our relationship will look really different than what it is now in 3 years' time. And that's, so to me, this is too early in our journey.
Yep, and I have to say that the first shoreline management plan where we have a co-management arrangement was a really good start. So we have a mover, it's Tony, we have a seconder in Terry. Is there any further discussion? There being none, I'll put the resolution. All those in favour, please say aye. No. Against, carried. Thank you, Stephen. Right, we now have the long-term plan pre-consultation. Leslie Kate presiding. Page 240. So we'll just take it as read. Have you got any particular comments you want to make?
The one main comment is we were hoping, we're still working on the content for the pre-consultation, so we do need to amend the resolutions that are in the report. But we're still working on that content, so suggesting that we remove resolution 2, which is endorsing the pre-consultation content as tabled, and that we amend resolution 3 as well, just still delegating authority to the chief executive for approving the final content.
Okay, so you've got one and 4. So everybody happy with that?
Yes,
Do I have a mover?
I move.
Tony, seconder?
No.
John?
I've got a question.
I'm sorry.
So will we see it before the chief executive uses his action? Will we be able to see it not as a council but as individuals to feedback anything or?
I would certainly like to think so, yes.
You certainly get a hard copy because you'll see the questions, for sure. You won't be able to see it online.
This isn't the consultation, this is the pre-consultation.
Yes, I mean, but the content. So
Yeah,
that I-
still absolutely.
We're working through that. I'd like
Yeah.
to circulate it to all elected members before it goes anywhere else. So.
That would be my expectation as well.
But we couldn't let you have a go at it.
Oh, no.
You'll get a hard copy, for sure.
But just so that if there's anything
Yeah.
that you absolutely want to put in Robert's hand, we can.
Yeah.
Okay, excellent. Then we have a move in a second day, so unless there's any other discussion for everybody? Gary? No, you're all good? Okay.
Is this the supplementary one that was sent? I just missed which one it was.
We're an long-term plan pre-consultation, but we will have, it'll be coming back to us.
Yeah, I printed that one out. So it's the topics of raising fees and things and looking at stuff.
It's not
I have-
supplementary.
Yeah, I have to say there's some matters there that give me concern, but we'll see what the public come back with.
Yeah. Okay, all those in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
Against, carried. Thank you very much indeed. So we're now on to the proposed district plan update. And so we've just, what a waste of money. Anyway.
I'm not wasting money.
No, I'm talking about the cost of the district plan. Well, any measures you want to highlight?
This is basically an update of where we're at, both in regards to the appeals and the cost of the proposed district plan today. I just want to note that the account number that all the district plan goes to it includes everything. So it includes conferences, stationery, admin, as well as things directly related to district plan appeals. So Steve and I went through and just nutted out the main categories as we saw them, and we had awesome help from the finance team on this. So what you've got before you is what we managed to nut out. We only went back to 2016 because that's when the decisions version of the plan was advertised for appeals.
That's great. Appreciate that because I think everybody's been sort of wondering and appreciate feedback about where that has been getting to. Are there any questions, Terry?
Yes, thank you for the report. This goes back also to when the regional council put out some information around the natural and significant lines around the country. These people that are the appellants left there, they seem to be, here we are spending $4 million fighting ratepayers over a plan. And I just wonder if we're just being too heavy on the lines of natural environment and things going on people's property. Are you getting that feedback?
It's talking about the coastal environment line.
The coastal environment
Set by
line.
the regional council.
Yeah, and then they backed out of it and we took it on, really.
The coastal environment lines are a very delicate issue and
Very costly issue.
also a very costly issue. And I, from my personal perspective, feel that we would have got pushback no matter what line we had included in the district plan. So we got the appeals. It's meant we've had time to go away, get better information, more evidence to support us. not rely so heavily on the regional council. So that's actually been amended, so that appeal's been resolved, is my understanding.
Those, the appellants have been resolved over the natural line of it.
Or over the coastal
Coastal
line, is my understanding.
So these ones left aren't anything to do with that?
No, the different matters, we've got plantation forestry,
Yeah.
we've got 2 structure plans, we've got section 15, which is our development and growth policy section, and we've got Harry dieback hearing to come.
So it really comes to me, if we do this again, I don't know how we're going to do it next time, but it was quite a big exercise we did back in that time, and Tony was involved with it heavily. When we look at these things for the future, and it implements private property, it has a big influence on what happens with the cost of us when we find our own ratepayers over a district plan.
Definitely.
So it needs real thought about how that goes forward, and just saying we're going to take that lump of land and use it for the benefit of everybody else, and you've got to suck it up.
We have been, like Steve and myself have been discussing, and this is just a very general discussion, in the next 18 months, 2 years, to actually start what we call a rolling review of the district plan. So you just do the sections at a time, and it means that we have the resources and we're focused on one issue, we do that properly, see that finished, and we move on, rather than trying to bite off a big pie. The one thing I would note is that we have managed to get our monthly legal bill down from 30,000 to sitting between $5,000 to $9,000. So Bruce and I are quite pleased with that.
And you look at the legal expenses, $3 million, eh?
Yeah.
Most of it's natural character, tension, and on the, we might have stand called more than minor. That one word sitting in that plan, cost you $4 million.
And
There
this,
you go. Yep.
So that's the worst word that ever went into anything.
and this district plan sits at the bottom of a cascade of others, and if the, the Resource Management Act, if that's, who knows what that's going to look like in 3 years. So to me, we do this.
I'm up to page 300, so we're reading it flat out.
So Joe's absolutely right though, it won't matter what we do, there'll always be someone that's going to
I think the thing
take the
too
challenge.
is we don't know what the reforms are going to bring.
Yeah.
We've got no idea.
And
So
a rolling review, I think, is the way to go. It needs to be issue-based because every section is integrated in some way, shape or form with other sections. So,
And our district plan will not fulfil the needs of the results of our shoreline management plans. I can be absolutely sure of that.
well, no, we're already talking to Amon about that, so we are very clear that we will, once the shoreline management plan is done, there will need to be a plan change. There's going to be a plan change needed for the spatial planning when it gets finished. So we're very aware of this. But we just think if we bite off dealable sizes, A, it shows ratepayers that yes, we have listened, and B, we're not setting ourselves up to fail.
well, you could just do a whole lot of guidelines and not bother about the plan.
Just for clarity though, this is not inconsistent with every other local authority in terms of any plan review.
Yeah.
So, in fact, looking at those figures myself, those costs actually
Quite small.
appear quite reasonable. Albeit very expensive for a district of our size.
A lot of money.
It is a lot of money.
A lot of money.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much for your work on this, Joe. So we're just receiving the report and the information, so we really appreciate that. Thank you to you and your staff.
Thank you for
And, do I have a mover? Do I have a mover? Oh, Selma.
I can't believe that.
All right,
I'll move.
move Terry, seconder. Do I have a seconder? Seconder Murray. Or any further discussion? There being none, all those in favour, please say aye.
Thank you.
Against carried. So we're now on to licence to occupy Kulatunu, page 2.6. And Ed, the roading manager.
Good morning.
Good morning.
How many more of these have we got to go? No, I'm just talking about that basic issue of boundary.
We are finding more and more of them, to be honest.
Oh.
And this is the first one. What we've done is identify this as an issue. We're introducing a slightly different procedure in that we're asking for a licence to occupy for 99 years, which will get vested with the title for the property, rather than do a 5 or a 10-year cycle. Makes it a lot simpler and reduces the workload for everyone. But other than that, it's a simple licence to occupy. The property was historically developed within an unformed legal road. It's a small section of the existing garage and their drip line for their foul drainage. No issues that we can see, no proposals to do any work on the unlicensed road. Should be fairly straightforward.
Do I have a mover?
Don't have to agree with that.
John, Bill, seconder.
I'll see that.
Tony, any further discussion? There being none, all those in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
Against, carried. Thank you, Ian.
Thank you.
Pleasure. Right, we now have the chief executive report. Page 36.
Your Worship. We'll take a paper as read, just to sort of add some highlights, because obviously since the paper was written, we've had an election and we now have a government with a significant majority. We're not entirely sure where that is going to go, whether there's going to be coalition agreements signed or not, but one thing is for sure, that this government has described itself as a transformational government. So the Three Waters reform and also the RMA review, which has just been mentioned, they will continue at pace. The suggestion is that legislation is already written and will be introduced into the House prior to Christmas, was the latest conversation I had with people in Wellington with regards to those water reforms. That will be very interesting to see what comes out of that, and it's actually something that we really do require to see as TLAs, because we're really riding blind at the moment in terms of what this Three Waters reform actually means for us operationally and also for our communities.
So what's the direction of the legislation, do you think?
Well, the legislation we understand to be tailored towards a number of new water businesses, or
you mean corporate
entities, not corporate entities, but they will probably likely be not quite crown entities either, similar to the type of Sugarloaf Wharf environment where you have three-way ownership, perhaps, don't know, but they won't be CCOs, they won't be crown entities, they will be another legislative type of organisation that will not be corporatised, is what I'm told.
So there'll be additional oversight cost to that, though, for councils.
So will the rating then impact go to that company when it's?
We don't know.
Again, excuse me, nobody really knows what's coming out of this. But again, in very simple terms, and I think I've said it before, is the creation of a utility bill is actually the way forward for filling the infrastructure funding gap that we have in New Zealand. So in the way that power companies send bills, we need, if we're going to fill that funding gap in the Three Waters space, we need the ability to send a water invoice on a monthly basis, because it's not a tax and it's not a rate, it's actually a utility bill. That is the way that Wellington believes is the best way forward, and from an engineering perspective and from a chief executive perspective in local government, I don't disagree.
For all the Three Waters or just the potable?
Well, again, no, it's definitely going to be two waters, so it will be potable water and wastewater, and there is still a debate behind the scenes as to whether stormwater will be included. From my perspective, I believe it would be very dangerous to exclude stormwater, because I think we would find ourselves as a country in a similar position in 10 years' time with a burgeoning stormwater issue. Stormwater is actually a massive infrastructure issue for New Zealand already, and as we go through the climate cycles that we're going through, we will find that these larger storms generate more flooding, and therefore stormwater becomes more of a focus for our communities, particularly if we've already siphoned off the other two waters. It's going to be an issue for local government if it's not resolved at this point in time. So Again, nobody knows where this waters thing is going at the moment, but we're hopeful by Christmas that we will have a good idea.
So like a utility bill, but you can't change utility companies like you can power. It'll be, that's the deal, that's the bill, that's what you pay.
That's right.
Will the tenure of the cost?
So I take it from there, that because of the changes, we actually as a council cannot make any rational decisions on water other than the status quo at the moment, because we don't know where the capital requirements are going to be in the future. We don't know where that's going to sit. And in terms of where we're heading, we've got to make those decisions in 6 months' time, really, to fit in with what may or may not be happening.
Correct. One of the...
Because I'm conscious of our community, and our community is making some demands, but our community's got to understand where this water might end up too, where we are, and I don't want to go and put a huge cost on our community that may or may not, we may have to pay it. And I see water meters in our community, a lot of people are against those. I'm just very conscious of where we are with water.
We've been given guidance from the DIA and from the Solgan LGNZ working groups that we have to plan for waters, and the OAG has reinforced this message that we have to plan for 3 waters for the next 3 years of the LTP as if nothing were to happen. So we're planning on a business as usual basis. However, by this time next year, that could all change, which would trigger a long-term plan amendment.
But I don't think we can do anything else.
I'm optimistic that if we get to that, DIA have already been clear that they acknowledge that is a significant risk for all local authorities, the costs of a LTP amendment, and therefore it is, I remain optimistic that that would become a government-funded activity if all local government in New Zealand is having to go through a long-term plan amendment. That's all I really can say in that space. So it's sort of planning for business as usual. However, there is a significant acknowledgement from DIA and all of the industry working groups that are tailored towards this reform that a long-term plan amendment will be a costly exercise for you.
Tony and then Mary.
So with that in mind, for my part, we should be promoting conservation and, for those who can, on-site storage, because locking ourselves up into the huge capital costs, which will be in the hundreds of millions now, would be a very, very unwise thing to do, given where this might go. So I think our messaging has got to be exactly control us, and we need to really start to think about conserving and what we can do ourselves, because the money that comes with this stuff is huge. And when I talk about 200 million, that will look after one town. It will not look after a district. And remember, we have 30,000 people to pay for this. When 3 years down the track, there will be some policy and there will be something different. And it probably will be centralised. It isn't centralised. 3 or 4 bodies to look after. So.
From a technical perspective, I just want to sort of comment on that. From a technical perspective, from a technical perspective, water metering is by far the best tool available in the toolbox to understand how well your network is operating. So the start back as the Shen report in 2007 and 2008, whenever the Shen report was done, that recommended water meters. The Shen report was focused on a funding side of the equation. However, it also acknowledges, and from an engineering perspective, I would be the first to acknowledge water meters are by far the best tool to know what's happening in your water network. So the push has always been in New Zealand to implement water metering as far as is reasonably possible around all water networks so that we can actually minimise the amount of leaks in the system. When I first came here, we increased, or I think we started a bulk metering, or it's called a district metering regime, which is far less costly to communities, and it gives an indication as to leakages, but it doesn't go anywhere near as far as water meters at boundary can provide. So when government came forward with an allocation of funding to enable us to understand our networks in far more detail, water metering became an obvious source of information that we could implement. And to start with, that's not anything to do with the funding side of things.
If I had someone come and visit me the other day, we were talking about water, but I asked the questions are wrong, particularly. Would you accept that up to 20% of water, if not a little bit more, could be lost in our systems, our reticulation system?
That would not be normal from, if that's the right word.
Would you also accept that in a lot of places where they've actually put water meters in and control the water and manage people's habits, there's been up to a 20% drop in demand through that?
Yeah, there is.
Well, I can't comment on that off the top of my head.
Well, Carolyn did that.
Yeah. I know from my experience, we have reduced water losses in certain networks after water metering to below 10%.
So what I'm getting at, as I said to this person in my town, that we could quite conceivably, through managing water and by metering and knowing where losses are, have 30% water.
We don't know that though. I think you've got to,
my words were,
depends on the age of the city.
quite conceivably. That's the word I use.
It has been.
Because we don't know. Long and short, we don't know.
We don't know.
No, there are many
And that's why, so
motivations.
it's just a theory.
We're getting a
No,
lot
it's
of
not a theory.
But if you look at the age of Thames, and they have a lot of leaks with the age of the pipe, I can understand that.
Oh,
So, a lot of
We've already
systems
got
might
them,
be
so we're not.
is an expectation maybe. So
It's not a theory, it has been proven. Where water meters have been installed, there has been an immediate saving because of that.
But not 30%, you can't come up with.
I wouldn't be saying.
Well, we put them in
that.
we put them in Narrabeen and town, got 20%.
Well, I'm not saying it doesn't happen, I'm just saying it does affect the age of the scheme on how old the pipes are, how the effects of the amount of wastage or leakage you get.
Yeah,
But
but
modern gear is more reliable than
metering helps to pinpoint where those leaks are occurring, and then you can fix them.
This is one example currently moving around where one house actually was identified, huge percentage of loss was one house, and they had no idea. So that, you know, there's all kinds of, it's just, can't understand how people are so upset with it.
No, but it's just having a history of no water meters, and then suddenly they're getting water meter, and they haven't got the benefit of the extended knowledge that people around this table have, and that people that put their minds to it find out about in relation to why water meters work so well. So
I'm not anti it, but we put network meters on the system because 3,000 of our ratepayers aren't there for 6 weeks of the year. So there's network meters are on the mains going into those areas, and if those mains start turning over water, you know they're losing water. So it's not like there's no metering in the system, but there's 3,000 people, dwellings, that aren't being used, period. Yeah. So that's the discussion. The other discussion is that they're paying for water and not connected as well, which is another discussion we need to go through. So I'm not saying that they're not negative about them, it's just understanding the benefits you're getting out of them.
yeah, Robin and then Tony.
Sorry to diverge into something completely different, but Rob, when your discussions, you've been having a lot of discussions about Three Waters, and I'm quite mindful of the fact that Sandra keeps on reminding us rightly that we've got a whole lot of people who aren't actually connected to town supply. Is there any indication yet about how the Three Waters reform is going to affect those people? Or not really?
Not at all. No.
Okay.
The focus for Wellington is purely those people that are connected to potable water supplies to make sure they provide the quality that is required.
Yeah.
And where community systems exist, that they have the resilience and ownership that is required. So there was talk that local authorities were going to pick up those community supplies. But again, we have to wait and see what happens because there's a significant cost in those community water supplies.
Yeah, well, I've had a conversation with a couple of people who have those up the coast in response to the draft water strategy actually, and they were also concerned that it ain't broke, and they're really happy for nobody to fix it because they've got systems that work, they've got community schemes that bring them together, and so I'm quite mindful of that.
I don't believe Wellington have the desire to leave water schemes alone.
So Rob, if I could just while we're on the subject, we had Dennis Teagan over at our breakout meeting the other day. He said the regional councils are setting up an infrastructure fund that you can apply for, say, $10,000 and put in tanks in your home and pay that off over over 10 years on your rates with a very small interest amount. So they're actually stepping up there and offering that facility, and I just wondered, should we be thinking that way as well?
What's that doing?
Being around this table to think about that. Look, collecting rainwater off the roof is a great thing, but you need to treat it at the same time and make sure that it is potable if that's what.
Well, they're not treated, most tank water.
Well, if it's purely for garden watering, then hey, I wouldn't be against that. But again, that's a personal decision and it's a decision around the council table. That wouldn't be covered by the water reform.
No, I wouldn't imagine that, but obviously people are thinking about this and you know, harvesting water is a pretty good way.
What I'm seeing around the country more and more is that a lot of, particularly stormwater issues, there's a lot of stormwater attenuation being used with water tanks around the country. So for new properties, the water goes off the roof into a tank. That tank then has a drip feed or some similar type of system around the garden, and then overflows go to a stormwater network. So it reduces your size of your capital outlay for stormwater.
Well, I think a lot of the issues around they didn't want tanks on their property. Big grounds come out with slimline tanks, you can slide up the side of houses and things like that. And that 12,000 litres you'll get with the two of those tanks will take you through a full month of January, which is the critical period. And then you're back to normal. So it does fill up that gap quite nicely for that serious time of the year when there's lots of water issues.
Yep, not averse to any discussion like that. You know, usually traditionally we sort of go through a process of approving these sorts of things and then we let us 3 years on record. But again, that's more a discussion for the LGC side of things, I think. So
yeah.
In terms of returning to the CE's report, if that's possible.
So the issue of the metering, I think we have to do a better job of signalling that, because if we take it at face value, if you get a cube of water a day now, every day, and you get a bill for roughly $600 a year for that, then nothing changes. You still get a meter go through your, a cubic meter go through your meter every day, and the bill is still roughly $600 a year. Until something happens, you say, well, we have to either reduce it or increase it, or if you use more than a cube a day, the cost is whatever. But I just get driven nuts by the people who says the costs are going to go up, it's just the council are going to fleece us. That isn't what's happening, it's just a case of knowing where the water's going, and nothing changes unless the demand changes. And then if you, in times of tight, and someone wants to use 2 cubes a day and not one, well then there's going to be a cost, and so there should be, because someone else misses out. So I just think how we message that and the message, and I just know around me, there's one person, they've got 30,000 litres now, they've got another one, and people over the road have got 30,000 in. There are a heap of people starting to put on-site storage to take their stormwater for no other reason to irrigate and clean your boats and cars and jet skis and whatever, and water grass your house, whatever they do. So it's really, really not right to think meters are a way of the council fleecing and getting more money out of them. It's quite the opposite. For some, we'll probably save them. And particularly if it's on demand. If you pay for a cube now and you're only using half a cube, well, your water bill will go down.
Yeah, but you get the guy who's waiting for 9 months of the year and says, I've accumulated 300 cube. Then I think
I think that's a different debate we have later on. That's why it's being equal.
Well, it's a debate.
From my perspective, in terms of the water meter issue, at this point in time, if I was asked today what I would be giving you as advice, I think it would be we need to focus on the installation of water meters so that we can have a transparent water network and educate our community about where the water is going, rather than focusing on the revenue side.
Yeah.
So I don't believe the need for water meters is related to revenue, whilst I fully accept that charging for water is a very useful mechanism in terms of those who use the most to pay the most. That to me is a secondary issue. The primary issue from my perspective is water meters should be at this stage in time considered as a way of assessing how efficient our water networks are and where our problems exist. And that would be a good few years of a programme to be able to gather enough data to be able to educate our community as to the quality of our water supply networks. And I think that would be a good start. Moving on to the Chief Executive's report, I just sort of did a quick flick around the district in terms of what's going on this morning. I just wanted to point out that we've now got the magazine out. It's with everybody, and for a marginal cost of 50 cents per copy. I think it's probably good value when you consider the value of some of the magazines that we pay for on the shelves.
Really good response.
For 50 cents, everyone's getting a good deal, I firmly believe. And credit to the team for being able to produce it at that cost, because there's a lot of useful information in there. Flexible Bay, it's great to see that the work is absolutely about to start on the groins in Flexible Bay. That starts on the 12th of November with completion before Christmas with 3 groins.
What to also add for those on the social media scene, that has been fantastic. The people that put it in are the people that have taken it out. And Judy and Steve Bailey and others, there's working bees down there with their front end loaders to help lift people, cutting the bags, get rid of sand, help get rid of stuff. So that is a community that is very, very on side and happy with the efforts of people made that happen.
Fabulous. It's been a 12-month exercise in getting there, but it's really nice to hear that we've sort of rebuilt the bridges, or should I say built the groins, or starting to build the groins. I also noted Pawanui, Whangamata and Taurua, it's sort of in the build-up to Christmas, so we're looking at the beach accessway improvements, and there's 1 or 2 beach accessways that we're going to get some handrails put in place and sort of a bit better access down onto the beaches, which is fantastic. And I also wanted to point out the RTS site in Taurua, which I'm very pleased that one of my staff has been incredibly proactive in terms of getting onto the health and safety issues around the district in relation to RTS sites in particular, and it's nice to see that work really well progressed in Taurua as we speak. The Coromandel Water Treatment Plant, the upgrade is well underway now. Okay, it's scheduled to be completed by May, but that over $3 million project is going well, and it's very pleasing to get the feedback around that project, particularly bearing in mind where we were a few months ago. It's nice to be well underway with that. And finally, I think the Create the Vibe Thames campaign has been absolutely outstanding. And if we talk about positive feedback, if anybody knows anything about the Thames grapevine, then following the social media with Create the Vibe has been an incredible response, because it's been positive after positive after positive. So a real credit to the team that have been working on the Create the Vibe and the community board, giving the staff the confidence to be able to deliver that programme has been fantastic. It's a real exercise in teamwork. Even with Waka Kotahi being a major funder, it's fantastic. And we've got government agencies helping Thames to be able to get into a really positive space on the Create the Vibe campaign. So all very good to see. I'll leave it there, and I'll answer any more questions if anyone has any.
Yeah, I've got one. It's the Transport Investment Plan. So we have Dennis Teague again over at Whangamata to tell us a regional council bus service. It's got to come into town on 1 day a week only, but twice 2 trips. We needs buy-in from both Taurua and Whangamata to make it work, and there's a cost around those around the town bus plus a bus trip back and forth to Thames. Have you been aware of what's going on here? Right. So are we part of that, or was it just their initiative?
As far as I understand, it was Mr. Take's initiative.
Yeah, so through the chair, so there's nothing actually happened yet, so it's a Rob Wright's an initiative from Dennis. Yeah, initiative. So he's going to all the community boards, like you say, talking about it, to try and get political buy-in. Has come through to start at this stage to start talking about costs and budgets and all that stuff. So if you're doing that around there.
He's chucked some numbers up, which obviously so, but there's an interest, obviously, for people to get connected, but they like to be connected maybe through Wāhi Pairo teams as opposed to direct Is that a discussion they've had with you guys, any of that?
There's no discussion with us at this stage. I think that, I guess what I'm trying to say, it's very preliminary, early stuff, so I've no doubt that he will be in touch with us once he's kind of got through this initial kind of,
It's funny, because you said Pyro's not part of the regional council with us thing, but why he is, it was crazy that how it works, so. No, it's not included, he said, it's not included, it's part of the
The
transfer.
hub from them is Morrinsville to Hamilton at the moment, and it will go out. So this is a TED issue being promoted by him in isolation of everybody else.
Yeah.
Very light on cost. And across our district doesn't have unanimous supply. And all I'm saying to people is the cost at the moment to Mercury Bay, for instance, would be in excess of 40,000. That's before you get to the game about bus stops. So I support what they're doing, but with private operators. It's not the space for ratepayer money, particularly at the moment, to be doing. So it hasn't gone anywhere. It hasn't done even the total buy-in of WRC, let alone talking to the right people here and how it all works. So it is being floated, and I hear other comment, I read other comment, but it's very early days, and it's light on who pays for what, and where does it go, and how does it fit in the Waikato Regional Transport Plan, which is about getting people into Hamilton on public transport and getting hubs and moving out. So the first thing I would say is from Morrinsville and that area in, and then the next one, and there's already one in Thames.
Yeah.
And as those things develop, it will grow. So it's not something we're going to wake up tomorrow and find out there's a public network of public transport. It will.
Yeah, it's got a lot of work to go.
It has got a long way to go.
Just my question's around the fact that in Rob's plan, he talks about the plans to investigate the opportunities for district transport network program. So are you obviously working on that?
That's a different space.
Yeah.
So
What's that about?
a different space, so we're looking forward to that.
So we can bring it to the workshop, council in November, because we, as you know, we did the workshops, we got the feedback, and we've got like a long list of different sets of projects that we could look at, and it would be in line with what Kotahi, so it's about looking about external funding.
Right. So it's not just buses,
So
all
no,
that other stuff.
public transport would be a small part of that,
Yeah, that's
grades and everything
I
else.
just brought up was
connected journeys.
So what from my perspective, the transport investment plan is how do we make that core infrastructure work for our area?
yeah.
And what input can we have locally to ensure that what Kotahi do is the right?
And there was cycleways and all sorts of that discussion, which is.
We've got a little, we basically got now questions on the executive summary on the financials and the city's report. Just to bring in, if there's any questions on the financials.
Well, actually,
3 months.
I'm personally don't mind a bit of loose discussion so that people have the opportunity to have a general discussion with Rob about sharing things that each one of you is concerned with. So, so are we still on the chief executive's report?
Yes, yes, so we're basically on the financials now, if anyone's got any discussion on the financials.
Thank you, Mary. Oh, hang on, so we're going off that part of that. Yeah, okay, yeah, sweet. Any matters to raise that anybody wishes to raise? If you quite like the format.
Tracking well for 3 months. And
Yeah, so fingers crossed, yeah.
How, is this the new?
It's a new format. Yeah.
Is everybody happy with this?
Yeah.
Good. Okay, however, if you think there's any tweaks, just bring them to Rob's attention, Terry.
The treasury performance, I just noticed that one, you got a comment on that?
We're within treasury limits, that's the only highlight that I could notice. Have we got anything else to say in terms of treasury?
At 138, yeah.
Yeah, we are working on our treasury policy. We are looking at expanding that graph a little bit more on the fact to actually show some of the treasury performance as well. We'll just have that one, so that's still a work in progress, but we'll be going.
Thank you so much.
So you'll just remember that next time that the pages will have to be printed slightly differently, so that the one doesn't, second one doesn't keep, every second one doesn't show up slightly.
Yeah.
Didn't you notice?
Only you can like that.
Online. You could probably some views online and yeah.
Thank you, Darren. Gary? Hello. Are there any matters you'd like to, are there any matters that you'd like to raise?
No, I'm getting myself back in order. Okay.
Awesome, okay. Rightio, do you have a mover?
Yes.
Tony, seconder?
Yep.
Oh, John first. John. No further discussion, all those in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
Against carried, well done everybody, thank you very much Rob and staff, also well done. So the adoption of the audited annual report.
Which needs to be deferred.
I didn't
It's just counting to 10.
Come on. No, it's all right, we've got this.
I got some cartridges there.
No, we've got your back on this.
Yeah. So the,
So we're just going to defer this, we don't do anything.
Well,
We have to defer this because we've got a bit of a hold up with the audit office.
It's nothing.
So unfortunately, it's been a little bit tricky with COVID and they've just decided to get a little bit, would bloody minded be too strong a word?
Possibly.
From my perspective, following COVID, the Auditor General, they amended legislation to allow local authorities until the end of December to sign off their annual reports. So Audit New Zealand clearly resourced to achieve that target rather than resourced to help the local authorities that actually could get their act together. So we just haven't got through all of the box ticking exercises that we needed to with Audit New Zealand. There's some performance measures in relation to water that they wanted to scrutinise in a bit more detail. And they have sent those down to a group in Wellington that wanted to have a look at all of New Zealand's water measures, I understand. So they just haven't been able to get through that work in the required time frame to be able to sign us off for today, which clearly we were ready for. We were ready a couple of weeks ago for that. It came through the Audit and Risk Committee, but we just need to wait for Audit and Risk to get through their exercise, which is fine. So the intention is that we will try and set up a special council meeting following the next workshop that we have, and hopefully Audit New Zealand or Carl will have his team in a position to be able to sign off at that time. I think it's like 2 weeks away.
So I'll say nothing. And yes, it is, we hope that the Carl and his team and the audit office have sufficiently got their act together to be able to move things along.
So we need to form a resolution.
Well, that would be my question, or do we just,
I can just put that we deferred it to the special council meeting on the 17th of November.
thank you, so we don't.
The reason.
The reason?
Yes, and the reason.
No, the reason.
Do we need to move and second that?
Yes.
Okay, I'll move.
And I'll second.
Okay, move me, second Barry. All those in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
Against, carried. Right, so we're now on to Thames and Whittier eyesight funding.
No.
Oh, what have I missed?
4.3.
So the shareholders council recommendations 404.
I'll take the report as read.
Excellent.
I'm happy with the resolution.
I'll second it.
Move Tony, seconded Sally. Any discussion? There being none, all those in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
Against, carried. And so we are now on to eyesight. So if you're trying to reduce your hours, you generally consequently reduce the funding that goes with it. So.
Yep.
Yes, Murray.
Do you want to move this, receive it before I discuss it as well?
Okay. Do I have a mover?
I'll move it.
I'll second.
Move John, second Tony, all any discussion?
You wish we heard Chairman Sanford here in this room saying there was no need for eyesight anymore. I am firmly in that camp that industry could fund those eyesights. I look at this and I'm a firm believer too that this council cannot afford the 625,000 that goes to Destination Coromandel. I think this in isolation is not where I'd like to see it be. I think this is part of a further discussion I'd like to have. And I think if we go and sign an agreement with them now, we're preempting that further discussion. Because I think we get into a whole further discussion on the funding of Coromandel, eyesight and all that.
Don't disagree. Any further?
Well, I have a question. So the new proposed hours that are listed on page 408, have you had an indication from them that, when obviously they've chosen those hours because they think that they will work, but did they like have a door clicker or something that they know that that's when most people are coming? So yeah, okay, that's probably a redundant question, but I did want to ask.
Yes. So, did you answer Robin's question?
Yes, you did.
Yeah, okay. I actually didn't quite catch the question.
It was really just about, they've suggested times to open and close, so, you know, Thames closing at 3:30 every day, and I was just checking that aligned with when they know people are actually coming to them. So,
they do traffic counters and traffic monitors, so they've been comparing that. So this again is because we're in an agreement with them, we funded tranches. We fund sort of every, I think it's every sort of quarter. So if for this next round, if they reduce the hours, we reduce the level of funding for this quarter. Absolutely, Murray, around the funding of eyesights in general, that's one of the pre-consultation items that we'll be going out with in November about that, but we're in a contract at the moment with them until, I think it's the first of, ends at 30th of June next year.
And then I see they're advertising for staff.
In the Thames eyesight?
No. For destination.
Oh, yeah, that's separate, that's for the,
Yes, the live on for them.
the Tourism Asset Protection Fund, STAFP.
Okay, Your Worship, I can accept we're going to put funding until next June. I think we need to sit around this table and in a workshop situation as we're going to decide, you know, we're talking about a substantial amount of money. We said we're going to go through line by line, and we're closing our eyes to it. Just because we've done it for years doesn't mean we should carry on doing it. And, you know, I'm happy to say that we will continue funding on a reduced basis till June, because we're only 6 months, 7 months away now, so I'm not worried about that. But I really think we've got to have a whole discussion before June, and that we've got to have a whole discussion sooner or later. Because of staff, they're going to have to wind down staff. As I said, they're advertising for staff now, staff have got to give them notice, all the rest of whatever happens. And I think that discussion is getting very, very important, very, very urgent. And I've been campaigning this for probably the last, I don't know how long.
So there's two parts.
Yeah, that's, yeah,
Two parts to this, yeah. So we've got the eyesight as one part, we've got Destination Coromandel as the other. While we could decide on the resolution for the eyesights, the fact is that there is a necessity to have a workshop on the future of Destination Coromandel itself, taking into account that the recent funding that they also got given, and really just work out a better way forward, because there's a whole changing dynamic that we have to meet too.
But this is, we're talking about eyesight until June 2021 and the resolution's being put, and there's another whole conversation to be had.
I would support funding of the eyesight for June 2021.
Yeah.
Provided before Christmas, we have a workshop and start sorting out where we're going.
And as I say, in the pre-consultation, we have the figures, and we've already talked to all the eyesights and info centres to signal that this is something that is going to be discussed around whether this is a service that council continues to fund or not. So they're well aware of that.
This is to force that conversation.
Yeah, well, I'm happy if it forces the conversation.
To have that discussion. Yep. Jerry.
Yeah, we know my feelings about this. I like this.
No, what are you doing?
So I'm very much for local funding for these things, but the Destination Coromandel should stand out there as a regionally funded thing if we want to have it and how much we want to spend on it. But I just see 90% of our people are local people and we still have a need for it, so it's a discussion we'll have at the moment. We're on this discussion about where it should stand and I'm supporting it continues as it is until we have that discussion.
Gary, did you want to add anything?
Valid points have been raised and I think we need to think this through very carefully.
Okay, good on you, thank you.
I'd just like to raise as well that with the, if we're accepting the resolution, that there may be that the ISO does close in Thames, and so we have to look at do we provide or how enable some other sort of service over the summer period. And one of the discussions is potentially using some of the Create the Vibes pop-up space over December and January at that peak season. Or again, what we did at Whangamata was we put out expressions of interest to see if a business wanted to take over that service. Because the indications I'm getting is that if we decline the funding, that Destination Coromandel will probably say that they'll close the Thames ISO.
Right. And then we've got the ticketing for the intercity and things to be thought of as well. But we've got this one page to be bold, like when you're congratulating the staff, to be bold. So let's be bold.
Oh, yes, okay, if that's the case, I'm putting the resolution, all those in favour, please go.
Aye.
Yes. So, exemption for council controlled organisations, page 46. So they never, that was the thing, they never, oh, please, do I have a mover? Move John, seconder.
Again, this is purely procedural. We've done it every year, so it's not even.
Second, Murray, any discussion?
No.
All those in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
Against, carried. Then we have the members' reports. Murray.
Another thing I wish to come on along with is we had Environment Point, the council came up to Mercury Bay, Yanga in particular, and had a look around, and I think it was very, very good. I think we built a few bridges. I thought it went well. And without going into it now, but the chairman gave us some assurances as to ruins in the bay and one thing and other, so I will be writing him confirming what he said to me, and we hopefully will, through our Mercury Committee board, will progress.
Cool.
That's all I was going to say. Oh, the other thing, if I can say, if anyone's worried about tourists coming into the Coromandel, Heather should have had a look at Yanga in the weekend. Yeah. She was absolutely chocker. Can I say one cafe there on Sunday morning did over 300 breakfasts? Just one cafe. That's what it was like.
Yeah.
And I think Christmas, everyone's saying we are going to be slammed.
Yeah, we are.
So that's why I looked at the 625,000, I believe we're actually wasting. I believe in that.
Tony.
Well, I want to just go back to something you've spoken about, the Kaitari Reserve for the Sunday celebration there. I thought that was fantastic, and for anyone that's travelling through that neck of woods, well worth going and having a look at something that's been done by a community group, and the Remembrance Wall, something pretty special, and it's a lovely space for people in that community that have contributed over the years to be remembered. So that was, you get a lot of things in your life from our roles, but that was one that was pretty special. And the other thing, during the week, myself, I believe the person, but gone up to a workshop put on by Waikato Lass and Port of New Zealand on fraud. I encourage anyone to go to those things, but I went where the topics were fraud in the public sector, fraud prevention and cyber security, and particularly the opportunities that arrive for those opportunists post-COVID, or during COVID as well. So that was a very, very worthwhile half day. If you get the chance to go to one, it's a great chance to actually have a yarn to people in other councils and whether they be elected or staff. And the speakers that come along, because they're all high end of the sector. When you talk to someone that's looked after this, the FBI and other things, you know, you've got some serious players. So for me, I got a lot out of it, and I've sent the appropriate reports back into staff, and Don has sent them, so if anyone wants them, they're available.
We appreciate that. Tony got in touch and asked if he could go along, which absolutely endorsed. He picked it up somewhere, I don't know where, so great. It was good that we got that, to be able to get that feedback, and just someone that's seen what's going on firsthand with all of that stuff, cyber security. Because how many has been hacked by me so far?
Yeah, a couple of times.
So many, including Leno here. You know, so, and then I got stuff from him that he wasn't aware of.
And I got another one. It made no sense that it wasn't your language at all.
Was it too polite?
Bit flowery.
What did I got? She signed herself up, Gary Sandra.
Yes.
But all see it and delete it, thinking, oh, it's a bit of a scam. Well done you, because it means you're onto it and you're not going to get fooled by someone that might try to take advantage, because some of them can be a little bit sneaky and clever.
Yeah.
So just be mindful and yeah, Sally.
I just think with my emergency management hat on, I can't emphasise enough about our water demand strategy and the dryness and the fact that all the information going forward is how to dry, and so that everywhere I go, you know, and the other thing that comes with that is our fire risk. And and fire to me is all about prevention, because however good you are, you know, fighting the fire, it's a bit late. And I think fire people see fires acting in New Zealand in different ways than they've ever seen before. So very serious, you know, you guys on the eastern side with fireworks and things like that. It isn't
Chinese lanterns.
Just so incredibly dangerous. And I just wanted to emphasise creating the vibe in Thames, like the tide has turned, you know, on stuff over the weekend, 24 hours in Thames, you know, ASB, Good Sorts, Thames Museum after TV1 News on a Sunday. You know, it's beginning to be on the map in a positive way, and I think that's cool. And I was out of town enjoying Auckland over the weekend, and I wasn't at the 25-year market, which you were at, I think. So I'll leave that to you. I think that's very nice.
Yeah, Pollard Street was closed between Cochrane Street and Paha Street, and the atmosphere of the market was really positive. Lots of people were saying, hey, can you make this happen every time? And yeah, it was really lovely. It was sort of, there were people doing balloon animals, and I can report I can get home a balloon sword on my bicycle, so that was the first time I've ever done that before. It's good. It's a sort of double-edged sword. I get the same. But yeah, it was really lovely. And I can echo what you say, Sally. Thames really feels like a lot's happening now, and I've observed, yes, that we've got our mural, which is fantastic, and the Ngāti Māori have started their one at the Thames storage depot at the northern end of town, and it's been really interesting going past that on my way to and from work and see people engaging with the artist and talking to him, and that's been really cool. The other thing which we had in here a couple of weeks ago, 2 weeks ago, was the Kopu Marine Precinct stakeholders meeting, which was actually, I thought, a really positive time, really positive meeting. There were lots of good comments, and you know, it stopped at like 2 o'clock or something, and everybody just stayed and talked. You know, it wasn't a rush out, got to do these other things. It was a real connection building time, which I thought was one of the really great achievements of that, is that people came and they had their time to speak, and they had their engagement, and then they stayed and continued to engage with staff and the care that they're going to do there and with each other. So yeah, it's feeling very positive. Well done, us.
No, just business as usual, environmental centre.
Nothing.
It's never went deep.
Oh, so no one turned up in Coromandel Town?
Well, the WRC councillors didn't.
They did actually, they just changed the time on you.
No, they didn't, Sandra, they didn't.
They might have.
Let me go to the town.
No, they didn't.
No, yeah, sure, I
No,
think.
they didn't, Sandra, they didn't.
Drive-by.
Drive-by. But you know, look, WRC councillors, I went out for a meal with you guys and Sandra over there, and there is nothing like talking face to face to people. I talked to some of the executive and some of the councillors. Some people actually knew me. I couldn't believe it, you know, friendly faces. That sort of interaction was actually worth its weight. Probably lock them up. Yeah, I'll lock you up. Anyway, that sort of stuff was actually invaluable. Really was good. Yeah. And seeing as I'm going to have to talk now because Sandra wanted to give you something or say something. Been dealing with more issues with ratepayers up there, which has involved policies and stuff. And I have yet to find staff wanting at any stage. And the last property dealing with, I'm at the stage where I'm just going to say, hey, the policy's fine. There's nothing wrong with the way the staff are interpreting it. You're going to have to sort it out another way, that may be legally, I don't know. But that's, so once again, I said at the last meeting, the staff awesome. It's totally giving me the information I want. Rob, I appreciate it. Thank you. Okay, Sandra said something.
I think the best thing though is what you're saying about the regional council though, that evening, just making that connection. I thought you were coming to that, Terry.
I was, but I had a discussion around the community and they suggested we wouldn't get the invite because the guys not to come. So I just went to the community and said, what do you think? They felt it was an insult. Tyra, Pawanui and Wangmatā, they couldn't be bothered to drive around the block and see them. So they said, don't bother, they're not bothered. Dennis Deer came and saw us the next day and he said, oh, we're sorry we couldn't get you, we didn't have enough time to get and see it. So it didn't mean much to us at all. So we're pretty disappointed really.
No, because they didn't even have you on the schedule.
No, wasn't even on the schedule. So here we go, trying to connect with an organisation that we have to give effect to, and they don't even bother to run. Pretty disappointing. You're right. Apart from that, we're very busy, just like Whitianga, town was cranking, really going on. And we are expecting a bigger crowd this summer, so things are really bubbling along, which is fantastic. Everybody can be pretty impressed with the weather, obviously, and the turnout was, you know, people swimming and just like summer day in January, it's unbelievable. Really. So, and a lot of them hung over the weekend, and I came over this morning, there was a trail of cars, so some of them stayed on. Yeah, the water tank thing is an issue because we're getting people wanting to put these in and saying we're doing our bit, and it's going to save 30 cubic metres a month, and you know, and where's this fit with the council's procedures and policies? So they're prepared to step up with some money and do these. The slimline tanks are given the option, not to have big tanks on the property, but slide them up the side of the shed and really look after that summer period, that month, which is where the big issues around usage come to. So I think we should be looking at some way of supporting that.
I think Terry raises a really good point there. How we can streamline getting some of these bigger tanks in that have got to go through the consent process, don't they?
Well, even if they just give deals, you know, and they promote them through the council, not saying we should front the deals, but.
Is it okay?
Yeah, we've got from the advice we got.
Okay, no, that's right. That sounds pretty good. Sounds pretty good, Terry.
Yeah.
But I think it's a good point you raised because the more we can streamline that, for an extended drought, it won't save them, but it'll
get them through that time period.
It'll help. It'll help.
And the other one is obviously what Sally raised, the fire issue. Fire issues are becoming suddenly ping, ping, ping. That one of Wangmatā, if that Nigel Avery didn't escalate to helicopters, they would have lost that peninsula.
That's right.
So he escalated it early, had 2 choppers there within 20 minutes, and it went under the road as well as across the road, go through the culvert into that pine forest. And, so it's an issue that's really big, and obviously at Oaktree as well. It's big. They've deferred their meeting, the MPI plans. We'll have a track that's coming up again soon. So.
So they're prepared to meeting with MPI to drop those trees?
No, the MPI is coming up with a plan to what to do with those trees, not saying what it is. Well, I don't know what the plan is, but they'll pay for the plan through DOT, which is pretty rare for MPI to front up with that kind of money to do that.
The danger of that pine forest is huge.
Yeah.
And the fact that you said that the one that you had there jumped the road, that just says that fire breaks aren't going to cut the mustard. And it's that dry out there. That thing got fanned.
Yeah.
And we were just lucky.
Yeah.
We were seriously lucky. The helicopter saved the day.
And it was really a spring, winter fire, it wasn't a mid-summer fire. So it just shows you how aggressive it is and how dry it is. It's been a dry winter.
Can I say two more things?
Yeah, absolutely, because
On
it
that
is
point,
too
I
serious.
think that people really need to understand the dangers of skyrockets and things. You know, like one person having a bit of a spleen at midnight can actually kill other people. And so that personal use of fireworks, and it's not against the law, but I don't know how we do that, but that to me seems really important messaging. And the other thing is around our developing relationship with regional council. Like one meeting does not cement a relationship, and how do we keep going with that? And then, you know, invite them back, or we go and meet them somewhere, or do, but keep working on that, because I think it's really important.
We're trying to progress the Te Tara Utāwhai concept with them, and that required having Russ and Catalina at the table. Cool. With the three councils and the Hauraki Māori Trust Board, and potentially the Parihara Collective. So, and that keeps a real unity with the Eastern Seaboard, because they're in the same boat as us. They're feeling that complete disconnect with.
And that's really useful, and then you've got Terry and his community feeling aggrieved, and so it has to be on all different levels, I think, as well.
It does.
Yeah.
But the regional council representative for here hasn't been helpful in that regard at all. And so I think that's been a bit of a stumbling block.
Yeah, and so we have to keep moving through stumbling blocks. That's all I'm saying.
So just to finish, I went to the AGM for the Paranui community.
Yeah.
About 50 people turned up, really positive meeting. A gentleman you know, Bob Renton, is now the chair of that organisation, so he's pushing their barrows, I'm sure, well for the future, and they've got a list of expectations they want from the community. And obviously, we'll work with them as we go forward.
Cool. Now, I appreciate that. Thank you, Terry. Just on the WRC thing, it was a good meeting, and there was staff there as well, and staff are great. They're really good, and honestly, sometimes I forget that they're regional council staff and think they're ours, but they work very well. Our staff for both levels work well together, so we're really grateful for that. The memorial wall that Tony talked about before was the Hahei Memorial Wall in their domain. So if you ever have the chance to go over there and check it out, it's seriously worth taking a walk into that memorial wall area, because as soon as you start walking into it, you feel it. And the tree, they've got a stone tree built into the wall. It really is quite stunning. And so I just sort of have the concept of the tree of life within a memorial garden. And then what a great way to utilise space, maximise a very small footprint that you've got in a place like Hahei by having just plaques on a memorial wall, because we can't keep hoarding cemeteries. I just thought I'd throw that one out there. And I still like the idea of grazing them with sheep. Visitors. So the radio was starting to ring and ask about the visitor numbers and how we were going to cope with still having some community transmission for COVID, etc. In Auckland, and visitors coming here. Well, our visitors come from all over, they don't just come from Auckland. So trace apps, sure. Signing in, sure. My credit card tells me where I've been. And I've got it out all the time. But there's all sorts of ways, but the key thing is this: we're getting mega visitors. there's no question. We are breaking, I would suggest, all our records, are we? Yeah, and so that New Zealanders are loving their country and they're loving exploring their country. And I think that's really quite special. And so I'm just wondering how we need to start rethinking how we get up to meet all that. It's a biggie, actually.
It's a biggie.
In terms of the water. And so we've been sending out those water messages, but, and Murray and others have been, of course, of seeing plenty of water tanks coming into the district. Good, really good. And if the process is easy through council, even better. But look, Ross has pointed out, Martin, did you want to say?
Oh, he just asked what item we were on.
Members' reports, Martin, you're on.
Well, first of all,
I thought you were going to have a shower.
First of all, I would just like to very humbly apologise for the fact that I had the sound muted but not the camera. So for a techie guy, clearly that was a bit of a failure. The only thing I would just like to for a member's report, yesterday or Sunday, there was a unveiling of a seat for Lois Wright, who was pretty much involved in every single community group that you've ever heard of and a lot that you haven't heard of. And so we went along to that. It was right down in front of the Bella Street Pump House. So there's now a seat there. And that was a pretty special event because, yeah, to me, it just sort of reminded me that we've got a lot of volunteers. A lot of our volunteers are getting on in years, and a lot of our volunteers, don't just go along to that aren't part of the Heritage Network. They're also part of Age Concern. They're also part of musical theatre. They're also part of, delivering meals and everything. And there is a concern amongst a lot of volunteer organisations that, we're just not getting younger people coming along. So that was something that was borne out for me on Sunday. And the other thing I just wanted to mention, Sally mentioned about skyrockets, and I know there's that display on New Year's Eve at Awanui, but I'm assuming they don't have skyrockets as part of that display, or it's all out to sea or something.
Nice, Tim?
Yeah, Tyra will do a display in the harbour on a barge or something like that on an annual basis.
Okay. So there's no chance of anything whizzing off into the forest from those?
No, miles away from the forest. You can't fly a rock that far.
Still good. Okay. Actually, Martin, if my memory serves me correctly, I believe I might have given Lois a community services medal as she lay in the Catholic Church for viewing.
Oh, goodness. Okay.
Last week too.
Oh, God. Okay, no, but I'll check that just to be doubly sure. So is there anything else you wanted to add?
No, that's all my brain's got capacity to think of at the moment.
Okay, and Maureen Burr as well from tennis, just so you know. So now Gary.
I'd just like to say that I'm very grateful for Terry. He's been keeping me informed on all that's been happening in Whangamata, because I hopefully will get down to the community board meeting, but I had been a little bit incapacitated. So Terry and myself communicate quite a lot, and it's very helpful to run things past each other. So thank you for that, Terry. It's keeping me up to date.
Awesome, thank you, Gary.
Right.
Okay, so apart from the memorial garden, visitors, I was talking to you about the with Karen Hay. So she asked, so that Radio New Zealand wanted to be on radio, and so they said recorded or live at 10:30 at night, and I said I'll go for the live at 10:30 at night. And so it went quite well. Then I was asked a random question about did I support climate change, No, did I believe in climate change? And I could honestly say, yes, I did. And, but I said it, our understanding of how we see that can vary from person to person. And I then explained about the shoreline management plans we were doing. And at the end, she said, excellent answer. And so just thought I'd share that, but you know. Otherwise, I'm embracing all these visitors we've got. I just hope that our infrastructure services can cope with it. And that'll mean not just our water, it'll mean our wastewater, and it'll also mean our solid waste. I'm actually thinking particularly about water and solid waste in this instance.
And rubbish.
Yes,
solid
waste,
waste, absolutely.
Yeah.
On the way to the 28th.
Right.
28th to the 10th.
You're away, I'll let it cut down on the waste. Right, let's go. All right, moving right along there, we'll start planning the Christmas party. Okay, public scooter, do I have a mover? Oh, mover and seconded, move Robert, seconded Murray for the